Welcome, everyone, to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. I'm a networking expert and the author of the upcoming book, No Strangers, How to Build Community, One Relationship at a Time. My why is the pursuit of mastery, and the goal of this podcast is to lock arms on a lifelong mission of daily personal growth to become the best version of ourselves. So let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. We are joined by a very special guest. She is an intimacy and relationship coach. So welcome to the podcast, Jessica Mowforth. Jessica, how are you? And what is life like in Calgary as its newest resident?
Cold, very cold, but I'm doing well. The cold here versus Toronto is very different. It's super humid in Toronto and very dry here. So you feel the cold, but it doesn't seem to like attack your bones the same way as Toronto does. So I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here. Joel, thank you so much for bringing me on and diving deep into taboo topics, a little bit about who I am personally, and just being able to have a chat that's raw and real.
It's going to be awesome. We have lots of listeners that have sent in questions. So this seems to be a topic that people don't normally get to talk about. They don't normally get to ask questions. We have an expert, and basically it feels like they're pretending that they're sitting down with you right now. And what questions would they ask if they had your time? So they're getting their free session with you through me, I suppose, today. So I guess to wrap up about Calgary, I'm just curious. So you moved from the Toronto area to Calgary in the summer. You did the road trip out there, took about 4 days. I'm just curious, why the move? A lot of people moved, and I moved from Toronto back to my hometown of Ottawa during the pandemic as well. So just curious for you, why the move?
I think the pandemic really showed me what was or what is truly important to me. And I did get out of a relationship. I wouldn't say like I definitely didn't leave Toronto because of the relationship, but I lived with that partner. And at that point, I asked myself, like, where did I feel inspired to live? And I had a real hard time staying in Ontario, anywhere in Ontario. And I was just like, I craved mountains and more nature and just, if I'm being honest, a different vibe. And there was a lot that went on and is still going on and in the world, but very intensely in Ontario. And I only know that from living there. If I compare it to other places, I can't, but I just knew that this was a vibe that was like, I need something different than this. And after a little bit of research of where I can find a different vibe and find mountains and nature, I was like, I can always move back home. So let's kind of give it a go and see what happens. And it's been a roller coaster. Like, I would love to tell you it was easy and has been, but it hasn't. And it has all at the same time. It's been great. I love it. I love it out here, but I think that I'm a very strong person mentally, and I could always push through things. But the reality is what we think of necessarily in our mind and how our bodies respond through our nervous system sometimes are different. And our nervous system speaks to us in ways that we really need to listen, because if we don't listen, our bodies burn out. And I recognized that heavily when I got here, where it was like my brain couldn't carry my body anymore. And I really had to listen to that, which has really helped me embody my own practice, like everything that I share with other people, even more so because the word surrender had to be at my forefront because I wanted to keep pushing. And I showed up here, there was no mandates. It was great. And 2 weeks after I got here, they all came back. And I knew I didn't know anybody here. I showed up on my own, and I do have a girlfriend that moved here with her partner a month before I did. But besides her, like, I didn't know anybody. And I was like, wow, showing up in a completely new province, knowing nobody, and now being told you gotta like stay home. And I work from home. So it was like, hey. So it was interesting, but it has been a learning journey that I would not have changed or will not want to change a thing. And I'm so excited for everything else that I get to learn about the province and just being submerged in nature. So I'm excited.
You'll get to check out the Calgary Stampede at some point.
And my birthday is during the week of the Stampede. So this will be a birthday to remember for
That'll
sure.
that'll be a twofer where you get both of them at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Big
So
celebration.
so you talking about moving just brought up a bunch of new questions for me. So you were talking about the stress that you get on your body.
Yeah,
So are you familiar? There's a guy named, I think it's Gabor Mate.
that's right. Know him
So
very well.
so I keep seeing videos of this guy, and every time I see his videos, I'm like, this guy's amazing. Like
He's so good.
I want to dig deeper into what he's up to. And I guess he just released a book. I think it's called the hidden something of stress. Like the
Oh, I
hidden.
have not actually read that one. I've read all of his other books. I've actually taken some certification courses through him as well, and I highly recommend his work for sure.
Okay, so it's like, oh, something like the hidden costs of stress, and it reminded me, that title came to mind when you talked about, your brain and your body, and having to go with how you feel. And it seems like his whole book is about that. Like when you're not paying attention to how your body feels,
Yeah,
there's massive stress that's caused, and then we know that stress is what causes disease and all these things.
totally. Because I think it's very important that we pay attention to our belief systems and the narrative of how we communicate to ourselves. But what's included in that is our nervous system, which lives in our body and gives us the intuitive of knowing of really what's going on, especially when it comes to stress. And when your body goes through stress, stress looks like many different things. But I can tell you there's not a human being in this world that couldn't move across the country and their body is not going to feel stress. The thing is I know I'm mentally tough. So I'm like, meh, I'll be fine. I can meet people. I can do this. I can do that. And my brain was fine, but my body was like, where am I? And I don't have my security blankets of my friends and family. Right. And then with all the new regulations that came in, I wasn't able to fly home. So it was my first time also being away from my friends and family for holidays. And like, I'm a massive Christmas girl, and like not seeing my mom and dad and brothers and nephew at Christmas was like heartbreaking. So it puts things into perspective. It really shows you what's important. And sometimes lying on your floor with your legs up a wall to just ground yourself is so much more than telling yourself it's okay. Because right now, your nervous system's like, girlfriend, I don't feel okay. And I think that's put things into perspective for me when it's like, it's okay to not be okay. And we hear that in our brain, but I don't know how many of us actually pay attention to what that feels like in our body, where it's like, it's okay that you're not okay, because what I'm going to do now is help you to do the things to ground so that you can get through this, as opposed to just saying, oh, it's fine that you're not okay. It is fine, but it's not fine to keep pressing on and pretending it doesn't exist, because it does. And that's kind of what Gabor Mate talks about so much, is that the more we do that, the more stress on our body, which then disease comes from, because we're ignoring the cues from our nervous system. And the thing is that our brain knows what it knows, but it doesn't know what it doesn't know. And our body stores emotion. It's like imprints on our nervous system. So our body's like, we need to process this emotion that's been there for 5, 6, 12, 25 years. Here's an opportunity. But your brain is essentially being stubborn, saying, no, we're good, right? We got to go into survival mode and we just got to give her. And that's why people end up in the hospital. Healthy, successful people that on the surface look like they've got things together. this very quickly showed me that as much as I'm a strong person and have a lot of things together, that I'm still a human. And there's always growth spurts, always. Life is a journey. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it truly is. You're never there. There's always another layer to be peeled. And I think that the more we humble ourselves to the reality of having a nervous system in a world that doesn't work, in my opinion, you open yourself up to so much more lessons and values that are true to you. And that's where I believe that joy and inner peace comes from versus the rat race and the hustle that's outside.
The pandemic has made it very difficult for people for Christmas the last couple of years. So I definitely feel you on that one. The first 6 weeks when I moved to Ottawa, I moved here and like 2 days later, the province went into lockdown for 6 weeks. So I'm in a new city and I'm in an empty apartment because I can't even go and buy a couch. I can't buy towels for the shower. I can't buy a TV. So there's just me and like one foldable chair in the living room. Like I was a forced minimalist for 6 weeks. So I feel you there. I'm just curious. You said you moved to Calgary. You basically knew nobody. You had one friend that moved a little bit before you.
Yeah.
Is there some, like, it's kind of scary, but is there something exciting about that you get to start over? And because nobody knows you there, you can essentially be anyone, you can be anything, you can weave a new narrative, you can create something from scratch. Does that cross your mind? And is that something that you get excited about?
I'm always excited about the possibility of newness and expansion and creation, whether it's relationship with people or not. Um, I would say that I lived pretty authentically back in Toronto, and I love a lot of the things that I'm about in that area because I've done a lot of the work to truly love who I am as a person. So I wouldn't say that I've come here and like really recognize, oh, I actually get to be me now. Um, but that's a great question that I've actually never thought about. So what I'm recognizing is not so much the excitement, but the awareness that nobody actually knows me. Where in Toronto, they did. So they knew what they could talk to me about. They knew what I was about. They knew things I did. They knew common friends. They knew all of those things where now I'm just a girl, right? They have no idea anything about me. And that has been an interesting and humbling experience because it's not like I just go and introduce myself about all the great things that I've done and the cool people I've met. And no, and people care about those things, but they don't care about knowing those things for the first 5 minutes. Like I actually get to show up and just be me. And then they get to learn about what I do and what I talk about, who I am and where I've come from and all of those things where that's very different because in Toronto, so many people knew me. And that sounds, even just as I'm saying that, that sounds like arrogant.
You network, that's all. That's
and that's the thing is networking to me is like so much fun. Like I love it. And I meet other awesome people. So because I always put myself in a networking position, I met a ton of people where here I know nobody knows me. And there's not a ton of networking opportunities currently that it was, it puts you back in your place where you're like, the whole world doesn't actually, you're not as special as you think you are, even though we are all special, but you get to actually just say, hey, I'm Jess. And that means nothing and everything all at the same time.
I feel like you seem like you're an extrovert, but I feel like there's some introvert going on there.
I am so much more of an introvert. I am very good with people. But I'm very much introverted. It's so funny because I also had a lot of people think that I am like fancy. And I think it's because before COVID, like I was going to a ton of galas and that's what you'd see on social media. And do I love it? Of course. But could I do it once or twice a year and be fine and live in Lulu's for the rest of the year? Totally. If someone said, hey, Jess, do you want to like have great conversation and like good food at home, games night with friends, or watch a movie in like cozies and blankets, or go out in stilettos and a red lip, 100% would choose option A. Totally. And then I would also need the next day by myself to like just do my own thing. Like I love being on my own. I love reading and just doing things by myself. And then that fuels me. And then I get to share that information with whoever, not even just information, but share myself with other people. I'm not somebody that could be around people all of the time. No way.
See, the way that you know that someone actually loves Lulu's is they don't say Lululemon, they just say Lulu's. That's how we know you authentically really love Lulu's.
Yeah, so. I don't remember the last time I've even said Lululemons. No, Lulu's. I'm wearing them right now, actually.
you gotta be comfortable. So totally. Essentially our identities come from what other people think of us. Now, if we are confident, then it's like we know who we are, we know our own identity, and we project that, and that's what other people get. But most people, our identity is a collection of the opinions of others. So over time, if you've always lived in the same city, over time, people that have gone to school with you and have played sports with you and all those things, they know you as, oh, this person is lazy, or this person is ambitious, or this person is skinny or overweight. And their opinions are kind of projected back at you when you go and you think that's who you are. So basically, the reason why I'm asking about when you move, it's like a clean slate, is technically, if you move to Calgary and nobody knows you, you could be anything. Like you can literally decide to start over. In your case, it's like you know who you are and you like who you are, so you don't have to do that. But for someone else, they can go there and say, look, I've always been more reserved. I would like to change that. I've always been slightly overweight. I'd like to change that. And they can go in and like work hard at the gym, and they can work on the personal growth, and they can present like an upgraded version of themselves. And that's who they are. I don't know. Maybe I think about these things
I think
too
that
much.
Totally. I think that would be, and I think a lot of people actually do that. I've had people, and actually now that you share that, it makes this make more sense, because I've had people ask me, what are you running from? Like,
oh, that's a nasty comment.
I know. I was like, I'm not running from anything, but I can see now, based on what you just said, where, and I don't think it's necessarily running from something. I think that people are allowed to create and recreate who they are all of the time. I think that's actually the purpose of life, is peeling back those layers. And I talk about this a lot, is understanding the difference between our strategic self and our true self, because we have both. We have our true authentic self, and then we have strategies that we take on as coping and protection mechanisms that have been brought on literally since birth. Like we knew what we had to do to get our parents' attention, to get fed or to be changed or whatever it is. And then we also learned through experience, like what gives us attention, what gives us love, what gives us belonging, all of those things. And then it's like, here's your true self and here's your strategic self. And this is life, is bringing those two together, right? Because it's impossible. There's not a human being in this world that doesn't have some form of strategy to gain something or protect themselves from something. So that's where I can see that coming into what you just said. And I don't think necessarily are these people running away, but it made me think of that when you said it, because it's like, I could literally be something completely different here than I was there, because nobody would know. So maybe I'll create some sort of like alter ego and just see what happens.
You could be like an Olympic weightlifter or something, bodybuilder. Yeah. You could be like a super book nerd. You could be a superhero. You could be anything you want.
I'm already a super book nerd. I just think that people don't catch on to it when they meet me. But I'm like,
Mm.
I could easily stay home and read and be totally cool with it.
So I guess the negative view is that you're running from something. It's like you don't like your identity, so you're going to change. The positive spin on that is we all have this image of the ideal of who
Yeah.
the best possible version of Jessica could be. Someone
Right.
that gets up early, someone that's going to the gym every whatever 4 days a week, someone that reads more books, someone that is not moody, someone that is whatever, all these different things. So
Yeah.
we all have this ideal that we strive towards. So I
Yeah.
guess the positive is if you're in a new city, it's not that you're running from someone, it's not that you don't like yourself, you're trying to change who you are. It's that you have this ideal that you're working towards, and maybe you feel like you have a clean slate to work towards that. Whereas in your old environment, it's like the claws of habit are dug in
That's
so
it.
deep that
Yeah.
it's hard to break them. Every day you get up, your place looks the same. You do the same routine. It's hard to break, but suddenly you're in a new city and it
It forces
feels like the dawn of a new era, like new
Yeah.
possibilities.
I'm going to actually, I love that you brought this up because now I'm going to bring that into my day and I'm going to play with that. I'm going to play with that. What I'm going to do is like go to different grocery stores because I could see now it's like I buy all organic foods. So my first thing was looking up like the best organic markets, but there's different ones all over the place. And instead of like, you are inspiring me to not just dive into habit of what I already know and to like do different things and just see what it feels like instead of getting caught up. Because I'll still right now go to the same grocery store and it's like, but if I mix it up because I can, because it's like Jess can be anything she wants right now, then I'm going to do that and see what happens. And when I have conversations with people, I'm going to think of that. It's like, who do I want to be right now? And not some like weirdo or lie, but just be like, do I want to be goofy? Do I want to be like, what is that? And just have fun with it as long as it's true to myself and maybe even that, and I'll push the envelope a little bit and just see, because I might learn something about myself that is true to me that I just haven't allowed myself to play with. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring that mindset in and I'm like, what would Joelle say that I should do today? That is so
I don't
different.
know if you should follow advice of what you think I would say for you to do, but
Next, I'll be
yes,
fostering bunnies and keeping them all.
there you go. I just listened to a podcast where the guy was talking about breaking habits, and he said one thing that he tries to do is that 25 times a day, when he's about to do something that is basically by habit,
Yeah.
he stops himself momentarily. So for example, he just goes, oh, I'm thirsty. Like it just comes to him, oh, I'm thirsty, and he automatically is going to grab some water. That's
Yeah.
one of 25 times he'll stop. He'll go, no. He'll deny himself those automatic urges and habits, and
Wow.
instead of grabbing water, he'll go and start reading a book. And then he decides, it comes to him, oh, I'm gonna go watch the last episode of Breaking Bad, and then he'll go,
Yeah.
oh no, and
No.
he'll
Wow.
go work on something else. And it's
That's so
it's
cool.
it's just to break the automatic habits,
Pattern
to
thing.
break those, like the cravings of dopamine, where I
Yeah.
gotta check my phone, and it's because the
Yeah.
dopamine is saying, oh, we need another hit, need
It's,
another hit.
yeah.
So he just pauses it, saying, no, I'm going to do 30 minutes before I check my phone. And it's
So
every
good.
every
That's
time you're denying yourself those dopamine hits, the addiction, the habits, it's like you gain a little bit of your power back, and everything is more um from your own willpower instead of being forced to do it by your subconscious. I don't know. I thought that
that's
was kind of
neuro.
cool.
That is so amazing, and that's like neurolinguistic like that's retraining your actual brain. Like that's what neuroplasticity is the word I was trying to come up with. But like, because they talk about Well, one, there's different things that you can do to trick your brain. It's not just tell your brain something different, but you have to put physical body action to it. But then when you're doing that, if you do what you just said to rewire habits, is like if you normally eat with your right hand, try eating with your left. If you normally get up and, I don't know, have a glass of water, like go read a book first, like do those things like what you just
I've
said.
heard
So
brushing your teeth with the opposite hand, the
yeah,
same
yeah.
as, yeah.
Your brain is moldable. I think most people think that they've got a fixed brain, and your brain can change. And that's where your power lays, is you don't become the servant. You don't become like, you're not just one thing forever. And I think that's where people get caught up in diseases, is they take on not even just diseases, experiences, trauma. It's like their label. It's like, I have this autoimmune condition. That's who I am. Like, it's my autoimmune condition, versus looking at what's going on in our nervous system, what's going on in our brain, and doing the work to rewire it, to identify it as something that my body is currently dealing with, that is now needing to work through, and then moving through that, and using the things that you just spoke about to do all of that. There's so much healing that is internal that we just kind of label it and go with what is going to subdue the symptoms, but never get rid of the problem. There was one thing in nutrition school that I'll never forget. And they said there's no money in dead people and there's no money in healthy people. So
That's sad.
That's a scary thing. But the thing is if everyone's always sick, whether it's mental, physical, whatever, there's a lot of money in that industry. So I think we need to ask that question a little bit more, so that we could actually look inward as to what we truly need versus the dependency on external.
That's more dealing with the symptoms instead of fixing the problems, right?
Yep, yeah. Totally. And that goes for nutrition, that goes for relationships, that goes for everything.
So we talked about the importance of networking for a second there. That's actually how we met. So we were both at an Elite Speakers Academy course. I think it was several days long. We met there. We've stayed in touch. I've seen all your progress on social media. You do a good job of building your image and cultivating a community. And I was looking forward to sitting down with you here today and talking, and I guess I'd like to go back to the very beginning. So we have a ton of stuff to touch on, and we have a lot of fan questions sent in. People really want to ask questions about the topics that you're an expert at. But going back to the beginning, when you think of your childhood, what are the memories that come to mind? So just now you think back to your childhood. I don't know if you were born around the GTA or if you just grew up there, or yeah,
born and raised in the GTA. My childhood was interesting because on one hand, like, I was very, very fortunate. I had both my parents that loved me dearly, wanted the best for me always. And I also had a dad that was very, and is still very hard on me. And he'll admit it. Like, he would tell me, I'm going to be hard on you. And a lot of it has to do with his own stuff. And well, all of it has to do with his own stuff. And my dad's not used to women in the sense of like daughters. I'm the only girl. He had all brothers. He's a very big man. Like, my dad is like 6'8" and a jock and a businessman, and is that, like, if you look up big jock businessman, like, that is, you'll find my dad's picture. So with that, there's nothing wrong with that. It's that when he had a daughter, was like, I've got to raise her to be a guy to protect her from
a big jock
that.
Businesswoman.
Right. Because my dad is also successful and attractive. And with that, he put it this way. My dad is a great man. And my dad was young at one time where he was attractive and attracted a lot of women in. So he also knows what it's like to not treat women great. And with that, he does not want his one and only daughter to be anywhere near men like himself when he was young. So he would let me know, like, this is what men are about. Stay the hell away. They're not safe. Right. And
so I guess that's him kind of projecting, like from his own
projecting
experience.
and
He's
protecting.
projecting it. Yeah.
100%. And I was like a tomboy growing up, and my dad absolutely loved that. And I was the apple of my dad's eye until I was old enough to make my own decisions. And then it became a problem because my decisions were different than what he would have chosen for me. And then it was like, but my dad also raised me very strong and opinionated and to speak up for myself. And all of that was great as long as none of that was towards him. So I love my dad. My dad and I are so much better now, but I learned to fear men at a very young age. And my dad was not the most sensitive, gentle, warm, affectionate. Like my dad would, if I said, I love you, I'd get a thumbs up. Or like my dad is always about the hustle and the grind. And I don't need to tell you how well you did because you can always do better. So there was a lot of like striving to gain my dad's attention and to be perfect so that I would finally get the approval. And the moment I recognized that, one, that would probably never happen, and two, it doesn't need to happen for me to be an incredible human, it was tough. So I had a great childhood in so many ways, and I think emotionally, a tough experience at times too.
Well, even though he didn't say I love you in return, at least you got a thumbs up and not a thumbs down. I mean,
Fair.
that could be worse. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? So to set the bar really low, I wanted to be a dump truck driver. So on that note, go ahead.
I never had I did. That's super cute. I actually spoke to someone the other day and this question got brought up and he wanted to be a fire engine.
It's good to have goals.
Right. So it's funny that you said a dump truck driver and he wanted to be a fire engine. You guys are funny. What did I want to be? There was a time where I wanted to be a firefighter. There was a time that I wanted to be a doctor. A singer. I've always wanted to be something big and like famous. So being a singer, which God did not grace me with those abilities.
Hey, with auto-tune, we could still make this happen.
I wish if I could be a singer, I would probably drop everything because I love it. I definitely sing around my condo like with a hairbrush. Like that is 100% me in my car, in the shower, but for real life, not so much.
Do you ever hit up the karaoke spots or is that too public?
I think this is where my introvert comes out more, where I'm like, I'll sing for myself. I don't know if I have the guts to sing for others. Sometimes friends, you have to be really close to me. If I'm singing in front of you, know that I love you.
Yeah, that not singing in public is going to be tough for your singer career.
Totally. Yeah. Well, if I sang like Adele or Whitney Houston, then I would be singing publicly. But it just doesn't sound the same. It sounds sometimes okay in my head, but then I hear it back and I'm like, oh boy. So I'm trying to think. The firefighter and doctor were probably the biggest. Actually, it wasn't even doctor, it was surgeon. I'm like, I just wanted to always be something in power, and that's lawyer was also one of them. I think I would have made a great lawyer for sure. Too many hours of work for me though. But I think I would have been a great lawyer.
We have a question. This is the first fan question.
Okay.
And this transitions from what you wanted to be as a kid to what you ended up becoming. So what or who inspired you to become an intimacy relationship coach? And this is from David Posada, who you might know. David Posada.
Okay. So that is a good question. I was the weirdo that would like sneak into bookstores and I would like have a book within a book. I was fascinated with understanding sexual energy because so it wasn't the act of sex that drove me. It was like, why is something that every human being embodies, even if you're asexual, it's still a sexuality. We all have it and we all come from it. Without sex, without sexuality, without menstrual cycles, human beings would not exist. And yet they're the two most taboo topics in the world. So between that and then understanding if sex can create life, what else can it create? Those two things blew my mind. And I'm like, I need to know more. So I started researching at a very young age just to try to understand. So this has been like, this is probably why I can talk about this for so long, is because, well, I'm no spring chicken anymore. And that started at 13. So there's been many, many years and different areas of study that has kind of come together as one. But I can't think of a single person that has sparked that. Now, that was very personal. I never spoke about it with anybody because, well, you have a woman that talks about anything sexual and usually she's labeled in a heavy way. Plus, I didn't understand what I was trying to learn. So the way I can articulate it now was not the way I was articulating it when I was 13. It was very confusing, but I was like, why is this so shameful? Like, shouldn't we be celebrating this? Then I went through sexual trauma, like a significant amount of it at 15. And I would say that shut it all down in me. And then the healing journey from coming out of that after years of like going through hell with it is I remember I was probably 18 when it started, but I remember just feeling like I was living somebody else's life. It's like I knew what I wanted in ways, I knew what I felt and what felt important to me, but I wasn't seeing that transpire in my life. Like attracting in men that I'm like, these are not good. These men are not good for me, right? Or certain friendships or any, like so many things. I'm like, this is not at all the life that if you asked me 5 years ago, is this the life that you'd be living? I would say no. So that's when I kind of started doing my own healing journey and seeing a therapist, joining group work, reading books, and just diving head first, which I've been doing since literally teenager. That is what, one, helped with my healing, but two, brought me back to my desire to talk about the things that we are terrified to talk about: sex, relationships, intimacy, our bodies, the cycles within our bodies, especially as women, all of that, because it's like, that's life. That is life. And it's so scary and so powerful at the same time. So for me, it was one of those things where I'm like, if I've done this work to cultivate confidence and courage to speak about it, I felt almost obligated in a powerful way to share it so that others can find that same fire within themselves, because it will set them free, right? And I knew what it felt like to be trapped in my own body, trapped in my own mind, trapped in the trauma and the narratives of what that means and the story of it all. It's suffocating. It is so suffocating. And I know what it feels like to be on the other side of that. And I think that is what more people need to share, because of the people that are still in it that can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They truly think that this is life. And people sometimes choose to end it at that point. And that hurts my heart. So it's like, sexual trauma does not identify who I am. It doesn't define who I am. It's an experience that I went through that really has shown me more about me than I ever would have known without going through it. And I know that sounds really tough. And for people that are still in it, that could be very triggering to hear. But when you can look at the experiences that we go through and see who we have become or are becoming in that, there's so much more strength than there is like breakdown and disaster, right? But sometimes we have to break down in order to break through. And that to me is a choice. And we need other people around to help to make that choice and to hold us up, because it's not easy. It's a scary situation and we don't all have the answers. And when you're in it, it's a very different thing from being out of it. So when you're in it, having the people that have gone through it and are on the other side, you need an army to be able to do those things. But I would say, to come back to the question, is I've been the sassy girl my whole life. Like asking those questions, one, asking all of the questions, but two, not leaving out the ones that you're supposed to keep quiet. I was the kid that wanted to hang out with the adults, because the kids, I'm like, I don't give a shit about talking about Sesame Street. Tell me about like life. I don't want to order off the kids menu. I want to order off the big girl menu or the adult menu, even if my dad has to eat half the food, right? Like that's, even if you talk to my family now, that's what I'm known for. So if there's a question to be asked or a topic to be spoken about that's not supposed to, I will do it.
Well, there goes our Sesame Street sponsorship. But so you had this insatiable thirst for that kind of information. And at what point did you feel like you had something of value to offer as a coach? And when did you decide that you wanted to be a coach as a living, that this would be your career, this would be your mission, the way that you with your life could give back and make a difference and help people?
That's a great question. I would say that once I started doing the work and becoming confident in my own healing process, because it's tough to talk about it while you're in it. But once you're on the outside of it and people find out your experiences and then you talk about who you are now, they're like, how are you this way? And then I started, like, that builds character. So that, and then speaking, like being asked to speak publicly about it. And I think that, and here's something that I would love to share with the audience, is that you think, and I thought that I was alone in this. I thought that my struggle is my struggle, and nobody else goes through it the same way I do. And you may be thinking that same thing too, talking to the audience, but you don't realize how much your sharing of your experience will touch hundreds or millions of people around you. And I did not know until I spoke publicly about what I've gone through and what I've done and all of these things, how much of an influence and an impact that would have. Where for 14 years, I hid it because I was taught that sharing things like this, like you don't share things like this, it makes you vulnerable, which makes you weak, which means you're going to get taken advantage of. People are going to judge you. People won't want you, right? You're damaged. You're flawed. You should have been like, my dad raised me to be strong. I have a background in sports, like competitive sports. And if you put me on hockey skates and had someone come and like confront me, I would have no problem taking my gloves off. But then I go into a situation like this and I couldn't protect myself, right? So there's shame and stigma of what that is. And I created many mechanisms to keep myself safe and to put on body armor that really was like edgy, because it kept me safe, because it kept people at a distance. I controlled before you controlled. And that is a hard way to live, because people can't get close to you. They're close to you on the surface, but they don't know you, which is why I saw life show up differently than who I was because I was being something else, because I was so busy living in strategy to protect myself. So I would say that as soon as I started sharing who I was, what I've gone through, is when it was like, this matters. And at that point, it had nothing to do with me anymore. I think how you can tell when it's a good coach is when they do the work and they have their own boundaries, but two, it's not about them. Like, I don't coach for me to get the glory, right? It's like, it's a humbling experience to be with someone else's experience and to be able to hold space and allow them to peel those layers and truly transform. I don't do anything. And I tell my clients that all the time, like when they're like, thank you so much for everything you do. I'm like, I don't do anything. You do. I'm simply a guide. And yes, I have some tools that I've learned through practice and education that support you there, but you did this work. And I want you to own that you've done this work. This has nothing to do with me. Right. So that's kind of sharing and seeing other people for who they are, not what they are, is really what motivated that.
So when you decided that you were ready to speak out about what happened to you, you joined Speaker Slam, which is this amazing platform for speakers for sharing stories. And your story, your talk went viral. It was viewed, 1.7 million times or more at this point, and you forgave the men who assaulted you, which is a hard thing to do, and I'm sure most people don't get to that point. Yeah. What was your experience like on Speaker Slam, and how much courage did it take to open up and be vulnerable and share that with millions of people now at this point?
Put it this way, I love food. Love food. I eat well, but I love food. I did not eat that day. Like, could not eat. I love chocolate. You could even have fed me chocolate. I was like, it was terrifying. It was terrifying. I was excited, but it was like, I'm not talking about how to grow your business and like how to just excel in your relationships. I'm talking about myself, not you. And I'm talking about something that is very shameful and very triggering. So in my brain, I'm like, okay, I feel okay to publicly speak about this, but how are people going to receive me? Are they going to be angry? Because the thing is what I spoke about is forgiving someone that. How are you with words on your podcast?
You mean like vulgarity?
Well, like the R word.
You can say whatever you want.
Because sometimes people get like trigger warning. I'm going to say the word rape. When like
I thought you were going to say retarded, which you're not allowed to say. So yeah, rape. Go ahead.
That's not a word, but rape is a very triggering word for people, and with good reason. But when you talk about going through rape as your first sexual experience, and then having love and forgiveness for the man that did it, and the man that assaulted me 10 years after that, people are angry to hear that I've gone through that. And then it makes them think of the women in their own lives. And then it triggers the women or the men, because this is not just a female thing. But if it's happened to them, then they just simply look at the other person as the abuser. And I get that completely. And I did for a very long time. Like it's easy to go and look at the people that do the bad things and label them bad people. And when you try to shed light on behavior is bad, not necessarily people, and that hurt people, and that continuously shaming, belittling, tearing down, stifling, throwing someone in a cell. Like as soon as I started studying psychology and understanding healing more, it was like, that will not actually make this person any better, which also means it's going to send them in a direction that they could do it again, worse, right? So for me, I would be lying if I didn't tell you that the main reason was to set myself free. I didn't forgive him for him initially, or them for them. I forgave them for me because I decided they would no longer haunt me, right? Like an experience that lasted 4 hours essentially lasted 14 years because I allowed them to stay within my body and control my everyday life, the way I connect with other people, the way I allow people to love me, the way I trust people or don't, right? And at that point I said, enough is enough. This is an experience. The experience is now over and I'm taking my life back. And I knew that I needed to forgive so that I can actually take the claws that have been latched to my heart for so long out of my body and they can be set free. And in that process, was I allowed to see the person as a human, a very injured, traumatized human that had very bad behavior and actions. I am not condoning sexual trauma in any way. Sexual trauma is horrific and kills people, right? Like it's not okay. And we can't necessarily control all of the things that happen to us, but we can control what we do after. And that's where the route that I chose to take. And I completely understand that some people don't. And I understand that sometimes it takes people decades to make the choice. It took me 14 years. But I believe that we have life to live. And it deserves to be lived, right? Whatever it takes to get to that space to live a life alive. I didn't want to simply survive. I wanted to thrive. And that was a choice. And it was an uncomfortable choice. And it was scary. And it was not linear, right? It was up, down, all around. But getting on stage, talking about those things brought up all of that emotion as I knew there was going to be people that hated what I said. I knew that there was going to be people that judged it. I knew that it was people going to be triggered by it. I knew there was going to be people possibly inspired by it. I had my family there. That was terrifying because as much as my family knew what I had gone through, they did not hear it in the way that it was shared. For people that don't know, you're not sharing about an experience, you're sharing from the experience on Speaker Slam. So when you hear me, you're hearing me from the intensity of being in it. And that's painful and very activating. So watching my dad and my younger brother be in an experience hearing what's happened to their daughter. And remember, my dad is a big, tough man that he still wishes I told him when it happened for every reason why every father would, right? So it was all of that. And then getting on the stage and finally sharing the words, it was like, it was a surreal experience because you could hear a pin drop. Like I remember in the middle of it, as I'm speaking, I could literally like people's eye, like I don't think people were breathing or blinking or anything. They were just staring at me. And then I was like, okay. And then when it ended, people just like erupted in everything, whether it was cheering or crying or all of the things, which was great. And my nervous system felt lovely.
Was it a cathartic experience? Like a weight had been lifted? Like you've been
100%.
holding on to it for so long that after 14 years, you were able to release that?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about doing the work and doing it individually, and then being seen in it, right? It's like not only was I able to share something that if with hopes has an impact for you, but I just got seen by literally millions of people in one of the most traumatic, hard experiences of my life. And were there people that made some stupid comments online? Like and that's the reality is when you go viral,
That's what people do online. The keyboard warriors. Yeah.
never have I had a single person to my face do anything awful. But the thing is like 99.9% of people I had people all over the globe, people that didn't speak English that were writing me in a completely different language that I then had to switch to English to find out what they're saying. And in the message, they're like, I'm hoping that you're translating this because I don't know how to do this in English, but I just want to share this. And so it's funny because they're even calling it out. Like, they're like, please do this.
Where could our listeners see this video? On your website, right?
So It is on my website now, yeah, because interestingly enough, is when you have the word rape in something like this, it gets pulled down all the time.
Ugh.
So it's up, down, up, down. So right now it is currently on my website. It got picked up by Interlight Media. So sometimes you can also find it on their site, but it keeps getting pulled because you're not allowed to say the word, which is why I asked you if you're allowed to.
Hmm.
Because they say that you're not allowed to gain attention around sexual trauma. And it's like, well, that's how you heal sexual trauma, is actually having conversation about it.
Hmm.
So
So the website is just your name.com, right?
that's cool for.
JessicaMowforth.com.
You got it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so people can go, and hopefully the video is still up there. It's up and down, but they should
It's
definitely
been
go
okay
check
on
that out.
my website because I was able to download it and like embed it. I just find that when you go search it through like Google and stuff, is that's where it's like on and off, on and off.
Hmm.
It's really interesting. Like I've even had networks reach out to me and they're like, hey, you've got this word here, therefore. And I'm like, have you seen what's online right now going around the world? And this is the
You can
word.
watch videos of like people getting murdered. It's insane that
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
have that word, especially in the context in which you're using it, which is
Right.
to help people. But
Totally.
speaking of words, I have some kind words that are sent in here from the co-founder of Speaker Slam. This is Rena Rovanelli. So she has to say, Jessica is a special person. She was willing to be extremely vulnerable and uncomfortable so that her truth and her message could be shared and received by those who needed it the most. That bravery resulted in over 1 million people hearing her story and benefiting from the profound wisdom of the power of forgiveness. It was a unique story and it deserved to be heard. I'm so proud of her. Rena Rovanelli, co-founder of Speaker Slam. So
Oh my gosh, my
what
heart.
do those words mean to you from someone that's done so much good in her life?
I don't even know if I can put it into words of what that means. Like my whole body has goosebumps and like I just feel like my heart is just like, ugh. Rena is an incredibly powerful speaker. She is a profound human being and like such a loving woman. She supported me from day one. It was somebody else that kind of submitted me into speaking and forced me, like literally, I showed up to hear someone else speak, and someone else brought me to Rena and was like, you need to meet Rena because you need to speak. And then Rena and I spoke, and Rena was like, heck yeah. And then she really, really helped me in articulating the words in a way that cut out the fluff. Because I think that we have been very programmed to believe that, like, even I asked you, like, am I even allowed to say this word? You know what I mean? Like, we're programmed to make it cushiony so it doesn't offend people. And Rena was like, no, like, the truth needs to be shared. And she was such an incredible support system and guide in being able to do that. And she was like one of my number one cheerleaders there. And I think that is another thing, is as I was walking off that stage, she was standing right there. And I just remember hugging her and just feeling like we had won, not just me. And she's a powerful woman. And if people get the opportunity to speak with her and be with her, I highly recommend it, because she's a good one. She's a keeper. So
The
thank you, Rena, for that.
the pandemic has been tough for those that do a lot of live events like her and I watch her updates on social media, and it's, she full time does Speaker Slam in these events, and then boom, no events for 2 years. And I see the struggle for her where, now the lockdowns are over. So she starts building the next big event, has a theater where she has put all this money down, sells all these tickets, and out of nowhere, the night before, new lockdown commences tomorrow morning, and it's shut. Like, you can't get the money back. The tickets are sold. The people have flown in. So it's been, a lot of industries have been hit hard with the pandemic, but the live event industry, and I know firsthand, I haven't done a single event in 2 years. But just speaking about her, it like breaks my heart to see specifically her passion, her gift, all the things that she does, having to take a back seat for who knows how long. And it looks like now maybe things are opening up and you can start up again, but this is what it looked like all the other times that it locked down again.
Totally.
So
And the
who
crazy
knows?
thing is the character of who she is will start back up like it never stopped.
Yep.
Right? Like, of course, she's hurting right now, as all of you are in that industry. But once she starts, like, her heart can't not be lit in that environment. And I cannot wait for everybody in that industry to be able to spread their wings and soar. And I know that all of you very much will, because that's your fuel. And I think that the events will be that much more profound because there will be nothing but gratitude. And I think that you now know what it's like to not have that. So when you have it, it's like, it's going to be potent. And I'm excited for that, for all of you.
So you help a lot of women as a coach. Do you also help men? Because Lord knows we need it.
I do. I don't market it. Because my main is women. I work with a lot of the husbands of my female clients. And then I do have a couple of men that have been referred to me or have reached out. So I do have training in men. And I've worked with a ton of men. I love working with men because I've worked with thousands of women for so long that it really helps shed light to the men that, because the reality is men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We are different. We are different on purpose. I do not believe that we are equal in the way we live and do things, but we're both equal when it comes to our value and worth as human beings. And I think that that's another taboo topic that I love to get in trouble for, is recognizing the differences between men and women. And of course, there are some commonalities as humans, but when we understand how men work, how men think, and women, there's so much more flow in all of that. So when I get to share with men, not just my own perspective of women, but what I've learned about women through studies, and then what I've also learned by working with women, which is like far more superior than anything you'll read in a book, the men walk away from the sessions like with their jaw on the ground, because they're like, if I knew this 20 years ago, my life would be completely different. Right?
That was my reaction after I learned about the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
I realized that literally my last long-term relationship that crashed and burned was because we spoke 2 different languages and we didn't know it. So we both loved each other. We just didn't feel that love in return because we didn't know how to share it in their language. And it's crazy. Like, we don't know these things, you know, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And I don't find love language to be specific to men and women, but the way we think and process is very, very different. Men, it's so funny. You guys have, like, if you think of your brain, it's like you guys have boxes. And in the middle of the brain, you have one big box. I think there was a guy that did an example of this. One big box. And in the big box, there's nothing. Like nothing. It's empty, still space. And every other box is where you put like work, relationships, money, whatever. Your goal as a man is usually always to get yourself out of these boxes and right to the center box where there's nothing. So what this looks like is you're sitting on the couch and you're kind of like not like, you don't have tons of expression, and your girl goes, babe, what are you thinking? And you're like, nothing. And she loses it because she's like, how could you be thinking about nothing? Like, that's impossible. You're lying to me. Now, what are you hiding? Like, we've heard this conversation many a times. And the man is like, I'm actually thinking about nothing.
So you think men are good at, I can't say the word, but compartmentalizing? Like,
Totally.
Okay.
Totally. Where women, our brains look like spaghetti. Like everything is wired and connected. And we're designed that way, which is probably why we're the ones giving birth. And because I can walk into a room to get my laptop, and if I see a sock on the floor or something that's fallen, I could get my laptop, pick up something on the floor and go put it where it needs to go. But if you were my partner and I'm like, can you take the garbage out? You're taking the garbage out, but you see like things on the floor, and then you come back in and I'm like, how did you not like pick this up or pick this up? Like, I don't understand. And you're like, because I took the garbage out. You guys are so logical, and it's like, if I'm hungry, I go to eat. If I'm thirsty, we're women, we will starve ourselves. We will hold our pee for 5 hours until we're dying and have to, because we just do all of the things and we notice all of the things, where a man is like,
Yeah,
no, I need to
I
go.
can't multitask at all. I can't even talk if there's two things going on. So I have friends that tell me this all the time. It's like, if there's music playing and a good song comes on, I like
Yeah,
stop talking and I'm now in the music. And people are always
totally,
like, "Man, you can't do two things at once." Like, no,
totally.
I can
And
do
that's
them
a
really
great
badly,
thing.
but if you want me to do something decent, if you want me to have a good conversation, it has to just be this
Where a
conversation.
woman could be listening to this podcast while cooking and like disciplining her child, right? And it's not that one is good, bad, or indifferent. It's just the way men and women typically, and I'm sure there are men that are better than other men at multitasking and doing things. So I don't want to say that this is all one way, but we're designed that way on purpose. So then if we're speaking heteronormatively in regards to relationship, it's like you have a man that has strengths in an area that you don't, and you have strengths in an area that he doesn't, and that's freaking power couple. And I look at it like business too. If I was to take on a business partner, I can tell you I wouldn't want them to have the same strengths and weaknesses as me. I'd want the opposite, because then we are literally picking up the slack where the other is not great at it. So that's where I think we need to look at more, is understanding the differences and how that actually serves us. Because both men are emotional, but if you have a man that's capable of putting, and I'm not good at the word either, compartmentalize his emotion, not to say that he's not to say that he doesn't feel, not to say that he doesn't have to process those after, but if we're in an emergency situation and you're capable of separating yourself from the emotion in this moment to respond to something, that's going to be far more effective than you being taken out by your emotions, right? And that's a little like, that's a significant experience, but it's to say that it's designed that way on purpose. And there was another thing, and you can look this up on YouTube. It's got millions and millions of views. It's hilarious. If you just look at up like woman with nail in her head, it's hilarious. And it's literally a woman with a nail in her head, and her husband, and she's complaining about having a headache. And her husband's like, take the nail out of your head. And she's like, stop telling me what to do. Just listen. And he's like, but you have a nail in your head. If you take it out, it will stop hurting you. And she's like, it's not about the nail. And he just literally stops and is like, okay, fine. Like, I'm here with you essentially. And she breathes and is like, chill. But it goes because you guys are solution based, right? So it's like, if you take the nail out, all will be fixed. Where she's like, just be with me. Like, just hear me and hold me. And it's hilarious. Like, it's like only a couple minutes long, but it's so funny. And I highly recommend watching it, because it really shows you the difference between men and women. And when you can find joy and laughter in the differences versus the separation of it, and the divisiveness and the blaming, shaming, or whatever judgment, then you can see how it's heavily beneficial to be
That was one of the
straightforward.
biggest breakthroughs that I had, was learning that guys basically want to fix things and girls just want to be heard
Totally.
and heard and seen and appreciated and loved and all those things. So all the time, and I mean, I'm so guilty, and I'm sure every guy's guilty, but you know, I'd have a girlfriend that would come home from work and she would complain about something from work.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like the solution is there. Like, it's so simple. Oh, you
Yeah.
know, well, have you actually asked your boss, you know, have you asked them about that problem? No,
Right.
blah blah blah. Well, you know, if you just talk to your boss, you could say, hey, I'm having trouble with this, like, what is the best way for me to do this, what are you
Yeah.
expecting? And that's not the way to go. It's like they can figure out the solution. They just want to know that they're supported, and
Totally.
they want someone to talk to, and they want to be
They
heard.
just want
And
to vent. They want to
yeah,
vent and want their partner close to them. In that
yeah,
moment, they feel vulnerable and they just want to feel you and know that they can share, because they already know usually they know the answer themselves,
yeah.
but they just don't want to do what they know they need to do because it's uncomfortable and they're feeling about it. So they just want to express what they're feeling, and then they'll be like, okay, I'll have the conversation, or maybe they won't. But it's like,
it's funny to see what we learn from one relationship and take into the next. So, for example, that relationship where it's like I'm always trying to provide, like, it's so simple, like this, the answers are there, like you complaining about it to me doesn't do anything, but if you actually did this, it would be over with, and that's not what they want to hear, and maybe that's why the relationship crashes and burns. But then the next relationship, when I was dating someone for a few months, she told my mom, man, Joel's such a good listener. Like, I can't believe, like, I'm able to talk to him about what, like, I had learned the lesson, like, just shut up. Even if the answer is obvious, that's not what they need. They need someone to support. And it's like, she would cry and I would just hold her, and she would share, you know, and I would listen. So,
and then it would be over. And then, and the funny thing,
and she would magically find the solution. It was amazing.
Totally. And I'm happy to hear that you're actually taking those lessons, because oftentimes you'll hear women are just crazy. It's always blamed on the other person, or men are just dogs, or what. Women are crazy and men are perverted is essentially the tones of what people believe. But the easiest way to deal with a situation is like that is like, ask her. As a man, you can ask her, like, do you want me to just listen right now? Like, what do you need? Do you want me to just be with you and listen right now? Or do you want me to offer you like suggestions or feedback? She'll answer, and then you do whatever she asks. As a woman though, like, I don't want to take them off the hook for also being responsible for what it is that they need, right? Like, if I was in a situation with a partner that I want him to just listen, I can make that request. I've had a rough day. Are you in a space where I can just like vent? I don't need any solutions. I don't need fixing. I just want you to like hear me as I have my like whatever type of fit I need to have. Right? That is a whole lot easier than having the expectation that he's a mind reader and going to figure it all out for you.
We're definitely not mind readers, as every woman knows. They might expect it, but they also know deep down that we're the worst mind readers ever.
Yeah. And I hear, like, I have a lot of women clients that when I talk like this, they're like, yeah, but he's my husband. He should just know. And that's usually one of the first narratives that I break down is I'm like, I don't care if he's been your husband for 40 years. He grows and evolves, you grow and evolve. And you also have to take into consideration that he's had his own day, right? He's thinking about whatever he's thinking about, or he's not thinking about anything at all. And then you come in with your experience, and he may be capable of holding you in that space, but to have the assumption that he's going to behave exactly the way you want him to behave in that moment is fantasy and unrealistic, and why there's breakdown in relationship all over the world. We need to start learning how to communicate, but first understanding what it is that we need. We can't communicate if we don't know what it is that we need. So that's
on the note of men desperately needing help here. We have a question sent in from Robert Alexander. He says, how do you pull in or manifest the woman is in brackets, like the woman, into your life? I seem to be able to manifest on the career side, on the physical body side from working out and other areas. However, it seems to be more of a challenge on the woman front. So any advice for our dear friend, Mr. Robert Alexander?
I would first look at what you're looking. Let me start again with that one. I would first look at what he is trying to fill with her, right? Usually when we are not attracting in what it is we want, is because and not maliciously, but we're almost looking to use that or them as some sort of strategy, coping mechanism, right? So if I would first ask the question, like, why do you want that person in your life? Is it because you genuinely want to share in life experiences and you want to learn and grow with someone? Or is it because you feel lonely? Is it because you feel obligated that you should have a relationship right now? A big thing that I see is people have checklists. Here's a big one. So Mr. Robert, who I also know, The biggest thing I want people to take from this specific question is to get rid of the checklist of the physicalities of what person someone needs to be. And
Physicalities meaning what their body's like or what they look like or their
everything.
appearance.
Yeah,
Okay.
all of it. What they look like, what their body looks like, how they dress, all of these things. I think that we have preferences, and that's not bad, right? I think that attraction is a very important thing in a relationship. But what I would rather people focus on more is how are you feeling in the relationship? So when you close your eyes and you're like, okay, I feel like I am in a space where I am both physically, mentally, and emotionally available to start a relationship. First, you have to ask yourself, are you available mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, right? Or you're just going to create unavailability. And that could be why he's meeting people that are just not in alignment with him. Number two is like, okay, yes, I am doing the work to create availability and space. Another thing that hides space is by occupying it with things and people that you know are not meant to be there. What that looks like is I'm going to keep dating these people or sleeping with these people, even though I know this is not going to be long-term, but there's nobody I'm really interested in. So it's better than not. That is space now that is unavailable to attract that other person in. So you've got to take responsibility of that, which that will also show you where there are still insecurities, because you will fully know what it feels like now to not be in relationship romantically with anyone. And that will be a mirror for you. Like, wow, I haven't had sex in this long, or I haven't gone on a date in this long. How do you feel about that? Does that actually, are you cool with that? And you're like, yeah, that's fine because I'm actually creating awesome things in my life that I'm going to share with someone. Or are you making it mean things? And are there stories attached? And are there emotions that come up? Right? So that's where you really have to look at the availability, the space energetically and physically in your life for that person to actually show up and come in. Okay. Then I'll say all is good. Yes, I'm ready. I have all the space and I'm prepared for this. Now I'd rather someone close their eyes and actually feel into, when I'm in a relationship, what does that feel like? Right? Like, do I wake up and I feel energized? Do I wake up and I feel inspired? Do I wake up and I feel loved? Do I feel loving? Do I feel generous? Do I feel forgiving? Right? And it's not just, I want to feel loved, like they're giving me attention. Look at less of what they're going to be providing you and what you're wanting to just feel like in your life. Because we all know what it feels like to be in relationships that aren't working and to have zero energy and to be walking on eggshells and to not be forgiving. Because two people coming together, I don't care how perfect these people are, each person is going to hurt and disappoint the other. Always, right? That's just relationship, especially when you're in relationship with human beings that, like, it's not a puppy, right? That just is under your control. No. So that's where it's recognizing, okay, how do I want to feel in my relationship? Start to embody that feeling. So if you're like, I want to feel energized, what are you doing today to feel energized in your life? I want to feel happy. What are you doing to create happiness in your life today on your own? If you want to feel inner peace, what are you doing to create inner peace in your life right now? If you want to feel inspired, who are you being around to feel inspired? What are your sources of inspiration now? Right? Because if you start, like, the energy is strong and we attract in what we're being. But if we're constantly living in the, I need this other person for this. And I don't think that this is, and I know him well, not, I don't know him well, but I know him well enough to know that, like, he is a strong and ambitious man. And I don't believe that he's sitting there feeling any lack without this person. So it's more just recognizing, here's an example. I am single and I don't have a dog right now. And when I first moved here, I told myself, I am going to wait until I'm in a partnership to get another dog, because it's just easier, right? But I just kept having this yearning. I'm like, I want this dog so bad. But I kept just saying, I'm going to wait until I'm in a relationship. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, that is a perfect example where I'm like, no, I want to get a dog. If I can tell by the way I feel, I'm not using the dog for anything. I'm not getting it because I'm lonely. I'm not getting it because someone guilt tripped me into rescuing or things like that. It's like, no, I choose to have a dog, and I'm going to create the life that I want without the expectation that I have to push the hold button until this person comes in. So it's like, if I want to create this home, I'm going to create this home. If I want a dog, I'm going to get a dog. If I want to go to the gym and take care of my body, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to wait until the other comes before I'm doing those things. If I want to feel love, how am I showing up as love? Maybe that's going and speaking to strangers and showing someone that you don't know, that owes you nothing, love and connection, right? The more we do that, the more satiated and fulfilled we are, which also projects a whole different type of energy, which will naturally bring in another whole person. But we get caught up in the main things where we're like, I don't need them for this and I don't need them for that. Like, I love myself, that we miss the little things, that we just start getting into the routines. And as people in our 30s that are single, like, we're not in our teens anymore where we're here, there, and everywhere. Like, when you're in your 30s, you've created routines, things that you know work and things that you know don't. And sometimes that's challenging to recognize and get out of, where I guess it brings us back to the beginning of our conversation, is also starting to do things different and don't get caught up in the routine of it, because we start to sometimes go through motions because we know them. And then we may not be as fulfilled as we believe we are, but we look fulfilled based on what we are on paper, right? Like, on paper, even when I first moved here, everybody would think I was put together and good. And until I actually shared, holy shit, I can't sleep, you would never know. So that's where it's like taking a really hard look at, am I actually fulfilled in my life? Am I showing up as inspiration and love and doing these things to create, like, am I cooking? Cooking is a massive one. How many single people do you know that just microwave food or cook like simple things? If you enjoy cooking and if you had a partner, you would cook a big lavish meal, do that. Maybe not every night, but date yourself. Date yourself until you are so fulfilled that it really doesn't matter if that other person shows up. And as soon as you get to that space, they always do. But as soon as you need them to show up, either they don't, or the person that is not in alignment does. And then you've got trauma bonds which can be a whole other conversation, which creates like codependency. And that's scary. And then you go through however long the relationship is, and you oftentimes need to bring it to an end. And then you're back in the same space. So I would rather, instead of just getting into a relationship for the sake of being in one, is to create that fulfillment within yourself on like a deep micro level, not just macro, and life will be transformed. And so will your relationships.
Man, I think Robert should pay for that advice. That was great advice. If you have his address, you can send him the bill in the mail. That was worth every penny. In your viral video, you mentioned that Tantra changed your life. So for those that aren't familiar with Tantra, can you kind of dive into that just a little bit?
For sure. There's different types, like there's different variations of Tantra, and it's quite deep. So to make it simple as like an intro to Tantra,
an idiot's guide to Tantra.
An idiot's guide is presence, and really coming into your senses for the purpose and intention of presence within yourself and your relationship to self and your relationship to source and your relationship to others. I would say Tantra was life-changing for me because I lived in my head so much out of protection. We all do. But the thing is pleasure doesn't live in our head. If anything, our head is oftentimes a destroyer of pleasure. Pleasure lives in our body. And I don't even just mean pleasure in the form of sexual anything. I mean pleasure in the form of like biting into your favorite piece of fruit. Like, that is pleasure. Hearing music, touching certain textures, smelling certain fragrances. And the thing is when you're in your body through your senses, you can't be in your head. It's impossible. You can't be sitting there feeling the texture of the fruit on your mouth, feeling its juices in the back of your throat, smelling it as you're putting it into your mouth. So when you can slow down enough to get into your senses, what do I see? Look at the different textures. If you get fruit and actually look at it, it's never just like one thing. Like there's so many different striations and marks and all of that. Like look at it. Feel what it feels like. Put it on your lips before you put it in your mouth. What does it feel like in your fingers? Is it wet? Is it dry? Taste it, smell it. What do you hear as you're eating it? Do you hear dogs in the background? Do you have music playing? Is it crunchy? Like, what is it that you hear? So when you get into your senses, it brings you into your body. It's the quickest way to get into your body, which then gets you out of your brain, which gives your brain a little bit of a pause so that you can actually be with yourself. Because the hustle, the go, 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 that's head. Your body does not want to be in a hustle. And it's a little bit different for men and women because you guys have the 24-hour day, whereas women, we have the 24-hour day and we have the on average 28-day cycle, which has 4 different seasons and phases within the 28-day cycle. So that will be very different and it's experience different. And that's where men and women need to learn the differences in all of that. But men, women, or anything still need time out of their brain and in their body, especially if they want to experience pleasure. And if we're speaking specifically to sex, is what this looks like is in a man, erectile dysfunction, right? Premature ejaculation, addiction to porn, addiction to sex. That's all head, pun intended or not, but like that's all up in your brain where you're thinking. Whereas when you are in your body, you will either last longer or you will be able to hold an erection better. You will be able to recognize what you're using the porn or the sex to be able to avoid. Like there's a lot more pleasure in that space. With a woman, what that looks like, vaginismus, which is actually the closing of the vaginal canal, lack of natural lubrication, lack of orgasm, inability to orgasm, hypersexuality, meaning there's a lot of women that will use their sexuality to gain attention or to gain love. A lot of men do this as well, like validation on both parts. So that is all in our heads. And then when we come to our body, a couple things happen. One, that's when you can actually explore the true depths of pleasure and not just the surface level. And 2, it also helps you to really honor and value your body and your sex and sexuality. So then you actually feel like, no, I choose who I want to share this with. I'm not just giving it away, which I think we have a massive issue in North America right now with just using sex as a tool. And I forget where I read it, but I was like, this is so true. It's like, if we're casually dating for like a month or 2, would I give you the code to my phone? I probably wouldn't. Most people wouldn't just give someone they've known for a month the password to their phone, but they're willing to let them on the inside of their body, right? And I think that because we've really neutralized the power and potency of what sex and sexuality really is, that when we start to become present and in our body, we value that more. Therefore, we choose how to actually share it as opposed to use it. Sex is not meant to be used. It's meant to be shared in a space that, like, we can go down the whole thing around soul ties. Like, it's the time where a man and a woman together, again, we're speaking heteronormatively, you are not separate, right? Like, that's the one time in life that you are actually one, and you're creating a third identity that could not be created as individuals. Like, that is super sacred and super special. But we don't have that conversation all that often, which leads us to the types of relationships that we see more common in North American culture. Did that answer that question?
That did. That was a great answer. You've mentioned that sex, money, and menstrual cycles are the 3 big taboos. So how do we remove the shame and the stigma around those topics?
Doing exactly what we're doing, talking about it. It was Brene Brown that said, the biggest killer of shame is to speak it out loud. Because we all think that it's an individual thing, right? We either get taught about our period or we don't. But if you think of periods, they're all like, they're inconvenient, they're painful, they're shameful, and they're dirty, right? Like, how many times do you hear men, oh, she was probably just on her period? Or like comments like that. I so badly want to be like, you know that you came from a menstrual cycle. Like, you're making fun of it. I'm like, you would not have existed if menstrual cycles didn't exist. But people literally die over money, sex, and menstrual cycles. People kill and are killed and traumatized around those three things. And that's not just in North America, that's across the world. And it is scary. There are countries that literally take out women's organs so that they do not have a menstrual cycle. There's countries that cut off a woman's clitoris so that she doesn't experience pleasure. And then we all know all the sides of money and sex. Like when we dive into like the dark side of sex and human trafficking and all of those things, it's like with all three of those, you've got the polarity, the dark and the light on both. And the only way that we can actually start living in the light and having so much love and compassion for all of that is to talk about it. And all three of those things are completely related. The way you have relationships with romantic partners is very similar to the way you have relationships with money. If you're avoidant, right? If you're anxious about it, if you're secure with money, like those are the three attachment styles with relationship. How many people do you know terrified of money? How many people do you know that are avoidant, that don't open their bank accounts or credit card statements? So the way we handle money, the way we handle sex, the way we handle relationships, the way we honor our bodies has everything to do with menstrual cycles too. Shame, confidence, or anywhere in between.
On the now that we're on the topic of sex, all these questions just blow everything wide open, because our listeners have sent in all these sex specific questions, because again, it's taboo, and most people feel like they don't have anyone to talk to about this subject, or they don't have anyone they can ask questions for these. So we got a question sent in here from Chantal Charon. She says, the high level of stress I experience on a daily basis often contributes to low sexual desire. I want to have sex and enjoy it, but I need to get out of my head. Any tips or tricks to help ease this mental barrier?
So I love that she recognizes that she's in her head and not in her body. So desire is in your body, pleasure is in your body. So that makes sense if she's in her head why she's having low desire. I would look at what kind of a libido she naturally has. Is it spontaneous or is it responsive? Spontaneous is you could be going out for a walk with your dog and all of a sudden you're like, I just really want to enjoy my partner right now. Or responsive is I feel absolutely nothing, but as soon as my partner and I start making out and fooling around, now I'm like game on. So I would look at what type of libido you actually have. Then I would also like self-care is number one for a woman. Number one, a woman will not function at her highest if she does not have some form of strict commitment to self-care. If you're not eating enough calories, getting enough sleep, moving your body, getting outside, breathing fresh air, feeling sunshine, stretching, breathing exercises, journaling to get it out of your head and onto paper. Breast massage is really good for getting into your body. Doing the presence exercise, you can even do that with fruit. Like use that as a practice, or something like your favorite food. If you don't have time to go out of your way to do that when you're eating. Like when you're eating lunch or eating dinner, like pay attention, get off your phone, don't talk, just smell your food, feel your food, taste your food, look at your food, be playful. This will get you out of your body, which will start to regulate and calm down your nervous system. And then you'll start to notice there's more energy. But it sounds like she might be, depending on how much stress and what type of stress, there could be a little bit of burnout, which when you're in survival mode, I can tell you that our body doesn't know the difference between a grizzly bear attacking us and our boss being a jerk or like tension in the relationship. So think about it this way. When you're getting attacked by a grizzly bear, the last thing you're thinking about is like, how can I love on my partner? Right? Your body does not want to have a desirable libido when it needs to protect itself from being attacked by a bear. So that's where it's like, okay, you've got to recognize where are these threats coming from? How can I neutralize them as much as I can? And then how can I take care of myself? Alone time, losing it on a pillow, like having bent up energy and then just crying and punching a pillow to release it from inside of you, and then bringing the attention back, even if it's just with a warm cup of tea. Like, bring it to your mouth, feel it on your chin, feel it on your lips, feel it in your mouth, smell it, feel the warmth in your hands. Like, we can do it with the things that we do in our normal day. When you're in a shower, what does it feel like as you feel the hot water dripping down your body, as you're putting lotion on your legs? Like, we don't have to go out of our way to create some crazy ass practice that takes a lot of time. It's bringing the presence into the day to day, but also having a commitment to self-care. If you're not eating enough and you're staying up late, waking up early, like, your body is a human. It's like asking a car to drive without gas. If you're not taking care of it, giving it its oil changes and giving it the gas it requires, it's not going to work. It's going to break down. So it's like, what as a human being do you need to function at your best? And that looks different for different people. And understanding your hormones, especially as a woman, and where she's at in her menstrual cycle. Tracking her menstrual cycle will also help a lot. So self-care, understanding your menstrual cycle, getting out of your head and into your body with like presence practices, and then understanding what type of libido you have. Because maybe she does have a libido, but there's no contact with her partner. So she just feels like she has no desire, but that's because her and her partner aren't touching each other to create it. So those would be my tips to that question.
What kind of conversations should couples be having when it comes to sex, and how many times a week do you think is best on average for couples to have sex? I mean, it's not 0 and it's probably not 7, and I'm sure it's dependent on each couple, but have you found with all the clients you've worked with that there's a sweet spot, whether it's once or 3 times or something?
I wouldn't say I found a sweet spot. I just find the sweet question is that, like, I've been asked that question thousands of times.
I guess people just want to know if they're normal. Like, if they're having sex once a week or once a month or 6 times a week, people just want to know, is that normal, or
am I normal and am I okay? So the biggest thing is, one, are you happy with it? And is your partner happy with it? If both partners in the relationship are okay, then you are having enough sex. If one partner is not, then there needs to be a conversation, right? About what's going on with that, and if there's compatibility and what can create more, right? Or less, depending on what it is the partner's needing to speak about. The thing is life is cyclical with all different types of cycles within it. So you could be with a partner that sometimes you're having sex 5 times a week, and then there's 5 weeks that you don't have sex at all, depending on what's going on, depending on illness, depending on injury, depending on pregnancy and birth, depending on stress, depending on so many things. And this, I want to say, is both a man and woman thing. This is not just usually, because it's usually the woman has an issue, therefore then she makes the situation where they're not having sex. That's not true. Like, there's a ton of men right now that are not having sex with their partner because, one, they feel emasculated, because that's how women have, and this could be a whole other podcast, but women, we have been very conditioned to be emasculating in order to be strong and independent and essentially protect ourselves. So there's a lot of men that don't want to have sex with their partners after a certain time because the desire is neutralized, the polarity is neutralized because of emasculation. Stress, over money, over work, long hours, all of those things. So it's both men and women, and both men and women have different libido styles. So most men have spontaneous, most women have responsive, not all though. So sometimes you'll have a man with a responsive and a woman with spontaneous, and the woman's like, I don't understand. I want to have sex all the time, and he could have sex once a month and be okay with it. So I think neutralizing that this is a man versus a woman thing, it's not at all. It's cyclical, that sometimes you're going to have lots and lots of sex and sometimes you're not, and that's okay. The only thing that needs to be present is the willingness to have conversation about it, right? At the end of the day, if you're both happy and you both feel content and satiated, then you're good. If one of you isn't, then there needs to be conversation. And there needs to be conversation regularly anyways to make sure that you guys are on the same page. And I always recommend couples at least once a month having a sit down conversation to talk about like what's working in the relationship and what's not to berate and bring down the other person, but to be like, I loved this. This was incredible for me, or I struggled with this, or I really recognize I'm craving more of this, right? Share expectations, communicate expectations, and then ask the other person if they're capable of fulfilling that expectation. Breakdowns in relationship happen all the time because there's a ton of expectations that are not communicated, and then the other person gets in trouble for not following through on the expectation that wasn't communicated in the first place, and then obviously was not agreed upon because they didn't even know the expectation was there in the first place. And that goes with sex, like bedroom and out of the bedroom, for everything. So communication is number one. Not comparing yourself to anyone else because you have no idea where they are in their cycle, because they may be having a ton of sex when you're not, and then all of a sudden they're not having sex when you are. So it really does not matter. It matters that what are you doing and how are you being? What's it like for your partner? And what kind of conversations are there so that you could both hear each other's needs, requests, expectations, and come to a common ground that works for both of you. So you both feel seen and supported in your requests and your needs.
In your experience, have you found that what turns women on is very different than what turns men on? I remember hearing that with research, it's like if you ask guys what turns them on, it's like they're thinking about being with multiple women. And then when you ask a woman, it's more about the setting. So it's like, oh, I'm by a fire, and you know, I guess it's completely different. I'm wondering if that's what you've experienced working with different people.
So that is, how do I say this? So that's not that when you actually speak to people behind
Is that a misconception?
100%. So a lot of men have been taught that what makes you guys men is to have a lot of women. There are a lot of men that may have some sort of arousal to the possibility of being with lots of women. The majority of men that I've worked with, spoken to, and know personally don't, right? There's a lot of men that are super happy being with one woman, and as long as there is an active life, like sex life, then that's fine. There's also a lot of men that I know that thought that this would be a turn on and went and had like a season of singleness where they were with lots of women or had many women at one time. And they were like, this is not nearly as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be. So I want to definitely kibosh that's not true at all. Women, so first of all, a man can be aroused. Arousal is different for men and women. So one, recognizing your libido, whether you're the responsive or spontaneous, and two, understanding, we also have to be mindful that just because a woman's
it's so complicated.
It isn't. But a woman is not like, it takes a woman on average 18 to 45 minutes to become aroused. Now, that's where the setting, the environment sometimes works, because that is contributing to foreplay. Foreplay is known mostly as like oral and fingers and stuff like that, which it 100% is. But sometimes like sassy texts throughout the day, or hearing a voice note specific about you and your body or what's going to happen.
Music.
Or the environment. Music for sure, especially if it's like a song when you guys first met and it was like, so all of those things, it's kind of like when you smell cookies that remind you of your childhood and it just brings back good feelings. The same things happen in relationships. So you can use those things to start to get each other's bodies prepared, and she'll be more turned on. But if he just comes home from work, does his like normal whatever, and then all of a sudden just wants to have sex and there's no foreplay, she's not going to be prepared. And then her desire is going to diminish, and then her body's going to remember that there wasn't a lot of attention shown in the beginning, or like repeatedly for a certain amount of time. So it builds up some walls, and there could be even resentment. And then when there's resentment, there's not going to be desire. There's not going to be passion. There's not going to be openness. So it's being intentional with what your sex life actually looks like. And I know plenty of women that also can detach emotions from it. So it goes both ways, and it's understanding each other without the stereotypes of what men and women should or should not be, and being like, understand her body. If you as a man like want to know, like, understand her body, because what works for the girl that you may be seeing now could be completely different than the woman that you were just dating. So it's like, what does she need to feel safe? The more a woman feels safe, the more open she'll be, right? In all of the ways. A man needs to feel safe in a different way. So she wants to be safe in like the emotional held, capable of opening, where he wants to feel safe that he's not going to be judged. And she does as well. It just lands different. But he wants to know that he is essentially good enough and capable, because there's a ton of stigma around what we all need to be in order to have good sex. Women need to have tiny waist, big boobs, big bum, and now big lips, right? And men need to be tall and jacked and make lots of money and also be well endowed. Well, it may look good, but that doesn't mean you're at all connected and good. You know what I mean? Like, what makes sex good is to be connected to the other person and to have a willingness to play and explore and learn each other. And sometimes that's as simple as missionary. Missionary can be great. It doesn't have to be like some BDSM elaborate experience. And maybe it
50,
does.
50 Shades of Gray.
Yeah, it does not have to be that way. There was a study done, and I think it was like 30,000 women, and they asked like what was their favorite position, and it was starfish. And they all were anonymous. So they're like, if you anonymously get to
Isn't
say
that just where you're like a corpse lying on the bed?
pretty much, yeah.
That's
And
the saddest thing I've heard in a long time.
but
But
the thing is, it's actually not, because we have been programmed to believe that it is. And the reason why they said that they liked it is because they didn't have to think about anything. They could actually just be there and feel what it felt like to be with their partner. The funny thing is they did the reverse and asked the man based on those results, and it was all anonymous because we know that people would not answer truthfully if it wasn't. The men actually said, when that was happening, I loved it, because he could tell that his woman was feeling everything and she was so into it. I think when it becomes a problem is when she's just lying there because she's scared and like.
yeah, I was thinking more like she's not into it. She's just this corpse that's just lying there going through the motions.
Totally. So it's how we get caught up in like stigmas and stuff as well, that it doesn't have to be elaborate. It could be something super simple, and like missionary, make eye contact. Like even that will help you connect to each other versus just going through the motions. But foreplay is massive, and that's the only difference, is it doesn't take men as long to become aroused, and that there needs to be effort put into to create arousal in your woman. And that sometimes is a long foreplay session, but sometimes it's also messaging her something delicious as you're on your way home, or bringing her something that she loves, something that shows that you're paying her attention and that you're putting in effort, and it's different for every woman. And that's where I guess with what you're talking about is also understanding the love languages, right? If quality time is her love language and you don't spend any quality time with her, you're always busy or occupied, I can tell you that's going to impact how she is sexually, because she's not open, because she's not feeling loved in the relationship. So it's all connected. It's all connected. And it sounds confusing in the beginning, but once you start to understand it, you're like, wow, this is actually so much easier. It's that it's been convoluted in so many other ways that it sounds complicated. And because there's so much shame and stigma around it, that owning some of these things is tough because we just want to believe that we know how, like, we're great, right? Like trying to get a man that can admit, actually, I'm not very great in bed. Now that I go through this, I learned that I'm actually very much like goal oriented and in my head and all these things. That's a tough thing for a man to like accept about himself. And then he has to learn how to be with a woman in a completely different way. You can do it though, I promise. And the
So
same goes for women.
so we have just a few minutes left. Are you okay if we rapid fire, just quick
Yeah.
questions, quick answers? Because we got
I'll
lots of
try to
fan
give quick
questions
answers.
here.
I'm awful at quick answers, but I'll try.
All right. Does watching porn ruin sex and relationships? You just talked about these body types that are unrealistic, and the thought is that if someone can just click a button whenever they feel that urge, and then
Yeah.
that urge goes away, that leaves less desire in the real world. And also when they're with their partners, if their partners don't do the crazy stuff they see in porn, if their partners' bodies don't look like the perfect people in porn, that kills affection as well. So I'll let you
Totally.
answer that.
I'm not a proponent of porn. I have seen porn hurt a ton of relationships. You can look up a website called Your Brain on Porn and you'll learn a lot about it. It's really compared. I don't know if they do this, but I read a study where it was compared to your brain on heroin and it has the same detrimental effect. Over the years, it actually breaks down your brain. So, and then it also gets you caught up in the rat race of what society believes that or sex should and should not be. There's a lot, like porn is acting. It is acting and it is not real. There is more real pro woman porn that is coming out. But to my personal is I would rather you explore your own body, understand what turns you on and turns you off, and have more communication with your partner and explore them and their needs and desires. And then be creative with them. Because even if you watch more ethical porn, that may be the polar opposite to what your girl likes or your guy likes. So I would encourage everybody to be a little bit more vulnerable and take some risks and have courage to have the uncomfortable conversations and create your own magic because it's in you, in all of us.
We have a question sent in from Megan Port. She wants to know, how do you navigate when one partner has a mental health disorder in a relationship? Now, this is hard to answer in a rapid fire, but I guess do your best.
It's tough. It's tough to answer quickly and it's tough to be in. It would all depend on what they're dealing with their mental health. I would probably get some support, whether it's a coach that is experienced in whatever like type of mental health experience they're dealing with. And whether I would start independently, I would start with the person dealing by themselves with a coach or a therapist, and then I would bring her in. I think I heard that question, like it sounds like her partner is dealing with it and not her. So that's how I'm going to answer it. And then if she needs to switch, she can switch. But I would start with them independently working with a coach or a therapist, and then bringing her in to show how she can support him. In the meantime, I would encourage her to be curious about how she can support him versus assume how she can, right? We're all different. And I think asking like, hey, I care about you and I want to show up for you. This is what I naturally want to do. And I don't know if that's going to be helpful for you. Is there anything that you can share with me that would be more supportive while you're dealing with whatever challenge you're dealing with? Because sometimes people need their own space and other people get reactive with that, where that's where it's understanding it's not personal. It's just what that person actually needs. So I would get curious about what they need in that. Mental health stuff can be very challenging depending on how severe, how long, all of that is. So I would 100% be bringing in a third person to help navigate that because it can be very challenging.
So we have a question sent in from the East Coast of Canada. This is from Ben Curley. How does someone build a stronger relationship with their partner if your job takes you out of town regularly? I do shift work as a tradesman in the oil field. Last mega project I was at, I saw like 10 marriages end, and COVID probably had something to do with it as well. Yeah. So that's his question.
Intention and effort. The thing is we live in a world right now that gives us so much freedom to stay connected to people, even if it isn't face to face. And it'll never be as good as, I do not think that it should be, I think it should be used as a supplement, not as like a source, which if you're traveling for work, that is a supplement. And it's like intention and effort, going out of your way for FaceTime and Zoom, seeing your partner, not just texting them and talking to them on their phone, hearing their voice, seeing their expression. If her love language is like gifts, you can like send little gifts that show up that are delivered that you don't even have to deliver to let her know you're thinking about her. You can get card games, which are awesome. There's one called, I have it, it's called We're Not Really Strangers. It's awesome. It's a card game that has questions that you normally wouldn't ask your partner, that when you're on your Zoom, you're asking these questions. So you're actually intentionally getting to know your partner more in a connected way versus talking about your day, right? Like maybe you spend 5 minutes, but maybe you don't want to talk about the oil rigs for 3 hours with your partner on a Zoom. I can promise you she doesn't, I don't want to make assumptions, but she probably doesn't want to hear about it for 3 hours either, right? So it's like being intentional with the type of conversation and being intentional with bringing the card decks and different things into your relationship that sparks new conversation that you haven't had. And then the effort in what are you doing when you're with your partner, right? Do you get home from the oil rigs and you're exhausted, so you just zone out with video games and beer and your guys? Or do you come home and you just grab your wife and you let her know like how much she means to you, how much you appreciate her for partnering with you in a challenging long distance partnership due to work? Do you guys have date night? Do you go out of your way to make love in different ways? Do you have adventure and do different things? Or do you just watch movies when you go home? Like have little adventures, like go and drive somewhere randomly, get out and make out in the middle of like a rainstorm, or for me, a mountaintop. But it's like do things that are exciting because that will give you energy to keep it exciting in your relationship. So again, intention and effort. And you can definitely have, especially in today's day and age, a long distance relationship like that and have it work. It's when people, both men and women, give up and just assume that the relationship will work by itself. Nothing works by itself. You give up on your business, it will fail. You give up on your relationship, it will fail. Partnerships are partnerships, and they require effort and intention.
I feel like that card game would be awesome on a first date, like to break the ice and ask questions
Love
that,
it.
Totally. It's not stuck on you where it's just silence and you have to come up with the perfect questions. I feel like if you come in with that, it feels like you thought about it, and yeah, I'll watch back this episode and write down what that card game was.
We're not really strangers. It's so good.
We're not really strangers. Last couple of questions. When you look back on your life and your career, what are you most proud of and what are you most grateful for?
I would definitely say following my heart in the sense of taking risks, like talking about the things that we're told we're not supposed to talk about, moving across a country when it doesn't make sense in the middle of a pandemic, traveling Southeast Asia for 3 months, part solo, part not. I think the biggest thing is having the courage to take the risks, because it, like, my soul knows, even though my human doesn't understand it. It's like, I've said so many times, I'm like, God, why didn't you just make me a lawyer? Right? Because it would make sense to everybody else. I can tell you, I have yet to meet a person that when they say, Jess, what do you do? And I say, I'm a holistic intimacy and relationship coach. I always get a reaction. Always. Oh, what is that? Right? What does that mean? Do you, like, all the time? It's never, oh yeah, cool. It's always, there's always more to it, even if it's just facial expressions. So sometimes I have to remind myself even of that, because it would be easier to, not easier, but it would be easier to be accepted into society if I did the normal things, a doctor, a lawyer, things like that. Not to say those aren't hard, they are, but they're acceptable to society. Where a woman that publicly speaks about taboo topics every day and with clients in like the most troubling moments of their life, you get a lot of raised eyebrows. And I've had to learn to have some thick skin because sometimes you don't know what those raised eyebrows mean, and to detach from that and just believe that it's coming from love. And when I trigger people, it's like I'm here to have a conversation. But yeah, so I would say that would be what I was most proud of, is to have the courage to take the risks when they feel terrifying.
Last question. If we had a time machine, if we could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self. So you have cute little Jessica Mowforth sitting beside you,
Yeah.
with all these years of lessons and mentorship and personal growth and experiences and triumphs and failures. What advice do you give to your 10-year-old self?
I would say to remember who I was as that 10-year-old girl, because in the next couple of years, things are going to change dramatically. And who you are as this 10-year-old is at the core of your joy. And what I mean by that, because I know that a 10-year-old would not even understand what I just said, but at 10, I was so free and liberated and like unapologetic. And very shortly after, like literally maybe a year and a half, 2 years after that, everything changed and everything became significant. What's coming up for me most is like body image and what I need to look like in order to be loved and approved. And it really took the innocence away from me for a long time. And I would say to my 10-year-old self to remember this moment right now and how free you are in the playfulness of who you are right now. And that will be magic and a superpower even at 50 years old. So to bottle that and to keep coming back to that, not just innocence, but play and like joy, to just be in mud puddles catching tadpoles versus the rigidity of fitting into a mold for the purpose of someone else. Because I've had to relearn and reteach and reparent myself to get back to that, because it's easy to lose the playfulness because of the responsibilities, because of the pressure, because of the molds, the narratives, right? So that's, I would come back to playfulness and just hold on to that and never let it go.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
So when you asked me, like, what am I most proud of? I also thought of the thing that I would probably say I don't want to say I'm least proud of it, but I think it would be beneficial to the listeners, is it's not a regret, but it's something looking back that I'm like, that is a massive lesson. And that is staying somewhere I know I don't belong because it's not in alignment, not because someone else is telling me I don't belong, longer than I could have and possibly should have. And I think of, I don't even know if you knew this, but I owned a holistic retail store for almost 8 years. And I knew I was done that business 3 years before I left it. And I've done that in relationships, stayed in relationships longer than I knew that I wanted to. And that would probably be something that, again, it's not like a big regret or a fail, but it's a big, big lesson of being still enough to connect and trust in your intuition to make decisions. Because I have asked myself, I wonder if I actually got out of this business when I meant to. And I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be for sure. I still trust in my process, but I see how I had patterns in both business and relationship because of what I thought it meant to my identity, right? Like people knew I owned the store. It made me look good, even though it was the most stressful experience of my life in so many ways. And I could have cut the cord and I didn't. And same with relationships. So I think it's also trusting that inner nudge and that guidance to know when it's time to stay and when it's time to go, and trusting the power in that, because I've never felt so free being outside of those experiences. And yet I felt like I needed those in order, like, to be free. And it's like, wow, hindsight's 2020, and seeing it from the outside looking in, it's like, if you, a listener, are in a situation that you know is not where you want to be, bite the bullet. It will serve you. It'll feel terrifying, but it will serve you.
If our listeners want to reach out to you to connect, whether they want to ask questions, whether they want to leave comments about hearing you on this podcast, whether they want to work with you, where can they find you? Probably a website, Instagram.
My website and Instagram are where you'll find me most commonly. So my website is literally just jessicamowforth.com, and Instagram is Jessica Mowforth. So if you look up my name, you'll find it. I personally handle my Instagram, so I will respond to you personally. And then when you reach out to me on my website, it actually directly sends me an email. So you're getting me personally. You're not speaking to a robot or an assistant in that way. So that would probably be the best.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jessica, for your time. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot about relationships, about sex. Hopefully our listeners come out of this being more authentic, feeling empowered, maybe showing up as a better partner in the relationships. And, thank you for sharing your time here today. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. And thank you for inviting me on. It was a pleasure to be here. And we literally just scratched the surface, which is crazy to think about, but forgiveness is key. Self-forgiveness, forgiveness of your partner. We're humans, and having compassion for what it means to be human is what defines unconditional love.
Thank you, Jessica. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'd love to hear from you guys. My goal is to grow this podcast organically, where you're giving me feedback on topics you'd like me to cover and guests you'd like me to interview. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel, and on Twitter at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.